Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to provide you with an update as to what's happening in Israel. Israel and Palestine have a long-standing dispute, and within the last 48 hours, Hamas, the Palestinian organisation, launched an attack on Israel, and the Israeli Prime Minister has now come out and stated that Israel is at war and it's gone on the counter-offensive. So we now have another live military conflict, which is a potential powder keg, because a lot of the world is split in terms of who they're supporting in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So in today's video, I'll provide you with more details of the attacks that have taken place and the counter-attacks that have been launched by Israel. We'll then go on to talk about what this conflict is all about. You may have heard about what's going on in the Middle East and Israel for many years and not really taken the time to actually look into why this has happened. So I'll provide you with a brief explanation as to what this divide is all about. We'll then have a look at the international response to these attacks, and particularly focusing on the USA and Iran, who are on opposite sides here. And then finally today I'll wrap up with my summary as to what I think the geopolitical risks are here, and whether or not this conflict could boil over into something much bigger. But before we get started on all of that, I'd like to say once again, thank you so much for all the great comments that you've been posting recently. Really appreciate those. And if you'd like to see more face-to-face videos like this, including some more relaxed ones that I'm not posting onto YouTube, and also to avoid the annoying adverts that you're constantly being bombarded with, then please check out my Patreon channel. However, if you don't like Patreon and you'd still like to support the channel, please have a look below where you'll find links to buymeacoffee.com, as well as YouTube's super thanks and membership scheme.
Warning sirens sounded across southern and central Israel. Hamas launched a surprise assault on Israel on Saturday, its biggest in years. Gunmen from the Palestinian Islamist movement crossed from Gaza into Israeli towns in an unprecedented infiltration.
Palestinian Islamist group Hamas rampaged through Israeli towns on Saturday, killing and capturing scores of civilians and soldiers in their biggest surprise attack in decades. The group distributed these videos Saturday from inside an Israeli military camp near the border of Gaza.
Hamas also fired a heavy barrage of rockets into Israel. Hamas military commander Mohammed Daif said the group had fired 5,000 rockets. This is the day of the Great Revolution to end the last occupation on earth, he says.
Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh said the assault that had begun in Gaza would spread to the West Bank and Jerusalem. This was the morning of defeat and humiliation upon our enemy, its soldiers, and its settlers, he said, adding, "What happened reveals the greatness of our preparation. What happened today reveals the weakness of the enemy." In southern Israel near Gaza, bullet holes filled the windshield of a car as bodies were found nearby, while rockets lit up the night sky as fighting progressed into the night. Hamas said it fired 150 of them toward Tel Aviv, in retaliation for the Israeli strike that took down a building.
We are at war, said Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and the enemy will pay an unprecedented price. The Israeli military said it had launched airstrikes into Gaza, where witnesses reported hearing heavy explosions.
Israel then responded with massive airstrikes deep inside the coastal enclave that led to the collapse of buildings and vowed unprecedented retaliation. During a security cabinet meeting, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, "Since this morning, the state of Israel has been at war. Our first objective is to clear out enemy forces that infiltrated and restore the security and quiet to the communities that have been attacked. The second objective, at the same time, is to exact an immense price from the enemy within the Gaza Strip too."
Israel's military said its forces were operating inside Gaza, but gave no details. A Palestinian bulldozer broke through the border fence, and people streamed out of Gaza to cries of "God is great." In Gaza itself, people rushed to buy supplies in anticipation of days of conflict ahead. Some evacuated their homes and headed for shelters.
At the end of World War I, the Ottoman Empire was dissolved, and the victorious European countries divided many of its component regions into newly created states under the League of Nations mandates, and the area of Palestine was allocated to Great Britain. In 1917, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration, which declared British support for the creation in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. This declaration was enthusiastically received by many Jewish people worldwide, but was opposed by Palestinian and Arab leaders who claimed that the objective was a breach of the promises made to the Sharif of Mecca in 1915 in exchange for Arab fighting against the Ottoman Empire during World War I. Over the course of the following 30 years, the British government put forward a number of different proposals. However, it became very difficult to reach an agreement between the two different sides. In 1947, the United Nations created the United Nations Special Committee on Palestine to find an immediate solution to the Palestinian question. And in November 1947, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution recommending the adoption and implementation of a partition plan which allocated defined territories to both the Arab state and the Jewish state, under the principle of Palestine becoming a single binational state. Soon after this resolution was agreed, large-scale fighting broke out between the Arab and Jewish communities in Palestine. After 5.5 months of intense fighting, on the 14th of May 1948, the Jewish People's Council gathered in Tel Aviv and declared the establishment of the State of Israel. And the following day, the US President Harry Truman confirmed the USA's recognition of the country. In response to this declaration, the Arab countries of Egypt, Transjordan, Syria, and Iraq sent invading forces into Palestine and took control of the area known as the Gaza Strip. This war lasted for 10 months, and as a result of the war, the State of Israel controlled the area that the UN had proposed for the Jewish state, as well as almost 60% of the area proposed for the Arab state. However, the Palestinians refused to recognise the State of Israel, and Israelis and Palestinians have remained in conflict for the last 75 years.
Good afternoon. Today, the people of Israel are under attack, orchestrated by a terrorist organization, Hamas. In this moment of tragedy, I want to say to them and to the world and to terrorists everywhere that the United States stands with Israel. We will not ever fail to have their back. We'll make sure that they have the help their citizens need and they can continue to defend themselves. You know, the world's seen appalling images. Thousands of rockets in the space of hours raining down on Israeli cities. I got up this morning and started this at 7:30, 8 o'clock, my calls. Hamas terrorists crossing in Israel, killing not only Israeli soldiers, but Israeli civilians. In the street, in their homes, innocent people murdered, wounded, entire families taken hostage by Hamas. Just days after Israel marked the holiest of days in the Jewish calendar. It's unconscionable. You know, when I spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu this morning, I told him the United States stands with the people of Israel in the face of these terrorist assaults. Israel has the right to defend itself and its people. Full stop. There's never justification for terrorist attacks. And my administration's support for Israel's security is rock solid and unwavering. Let me say this as clearly as I can. This is not a moment for any party hostile to Israel to exploit these attacks to seek advantage. The world is watching.
Alongside Joe Biden, a number of other countries have come out in support of Israel. The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said, "Terrifying news reaches us today from Israel. We are deeply shocked by the rocket fire from Gaza and the escalating violence. Germany condemns these attacks by Hamas and stands by Israel." Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Canada strongly condemns the current terrorist attacks against Israel. These acts of violence are completely unacceptable. We stand with Israel and fully support its right to defend itself. Our thoughts are with everyone affected by this. Civilian life must be protected. British Foreign Minister James Cleverly said the UK unequivocally condemns the horrific attacks by Hamas on Israeli civilians. The UK will always support Israel's right to defend itself. European Union Commissioner Chief Ursula von der Leyen said, "I unequivocally condemn the attack carried out by Hamas terrorists against Israel. It is terrorism in its most despicable form." Poland's president said, "I am shocked by today's brutal attacks on Israel by Hamas. Rocket attacks and detention of civilians as hostages arouse our deepest opposition. Poland strongly condemns all acts of violence." The Italian Prime Minister's office stated, A meeting chaired by Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni was held today on the dramatic situation unfolding in Israel, which has been the target of a military and terrorist attack. The government is following the evolution of the situation with concern. Particular attention is being paid to the security of the Jewish community in the country. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said Hamas and other Palestinian militants attacked Israel from Gaza yesterday. Japan strongly condemns the attacks, which severely harmed innocent civilians. I express my condolence to the bereaved families and heartfelt sympathies to the injured. A number of people were reportedly abducted by the militants. Japan strongly condemns such acts and urges their immediate release. Japan is deeply concerned about a number of casualties in Gaza as well. All parties concerned should exercise maximum restraint. In terms of the countries that are supporting the Palestinians, Iran is the biggest supporter, and an advisor to Iran's supreme leader congratulated Palestinian fighters, saying in a statement, "We will stand by the Palestinian fighters until the liberation of Palestine and Jerusalem." Iran's state television showed parliament members rising from their seats to chant "Death to Israel." And the spokesperson for Iran's foreign ministry was quoted as saying, "In this operation, the elements of surprise and other combined methods were used, which showed the Palestinian people's confidence in the face of the occupiers." The Iran-backed Lebanese group Hezbollah, an arch foe of Israel, said it was in direct contact with the leadership of the Palestinian resistance and described events as a decisive response to Israel's continued occupation and a message to those seeking normalization with Israel. And following on from this, it's been reported that Hezbollah have exchanged artillery and rocket fire with Israel. Hezbollah said on Sunday the 8th of October it had launched guided rockets and artillery onto 3 posts in the Shebaa Farms in solidarity with the Palestinian people. Israel has held the Shebaa Farms, a 15-square-mile patch of land, since 1967. However, both Syria and Lebanon claim the Shebaa Farms are Lebanese. The Foreign Ministry for Qatar said Israel alone was responsible for the ongoing escalation of violence with the Palestinian people and called for both sides to show restraint. Kuwait have expressed grave concern over developments between Israel and Palestinians, blaming Israel for what it calls blatant attacks. Indonesia has announced that it's very concerned about the increasing escalation of the conflict between Palestine and Israel, and stated that it requests that the act of violence stop immediately to avoid increasing human casualties. The root of the conflict, namely the occupation of the Palestinian territories by Israel, must be resolved according to the parameters agreed upon by the UN. And the chairperson of the Commission of the African Union said the denial of fundamental rights of the Palestinian people, particularly that of an independent and sovereign state, is the main cause of the permanent Israeli-Palestinian tension. The chairperson urgently appeals to both parties to put an end to military hostilities and to return without conditions to the negotiating table. So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video firstly to make sure that you're up to speed as to what's happening in the Middle East. The conflict between Israelis and Palestinians has been going on for a long period of time. And with any sort of conflict like this, it's easy to get news wary, where you just think, oh, I don't know what's going on there, but it's of no relevance. They are always fighting these people. But I think this latest incident is actually quite serious. It's been reported that the loss of life in Israel on October the 7th represented the single bloodiest day for the last 50 years in Israel. So that represents quite a serious situation. And then when you add on top the fact that the Israeli Prime Minister has come out and stated that Israel is at war and that the Palestinians will pay a heavy price, there is a real risk here that this could escalate into a long-standing conflict. And the risk that poses to the global economy is that there are a lot of countries that are taking sides in this conflict. As we saw earlier in the video, Joe Biden has come out and stated that the USA is standing firmly behind Israel. And that sends a direct message to Iran, who've been standing behind the Palestinians. And it's been reported that Iran have provided hundreds of millions of dollars of financial support to Hezbollah, who are predominantly based in Lebanon, and who are now offering their support to Hamas. So there is a possibility here, if this conflict does flare up, that other parties could be drawn in. But even if that doesn't happen, one of the problems that we have right now is that the global economy is quite fragile. As I reported in a recent video, there are 17 countries that are officially in recession right now, including Germany, which is the 4th largest economy in the world, so a big player. And there are a number of others that are teetering on the brink of recession. And we've got a lot of nervousness in terms of what's happening with interest rates, following the recent announcement that there were 336,000 jobs added in the USA in September, which was streets ahead of what everybody was expecting. there is now increased nervousness that the Fed will need to increase interest rates even further to try to bring inflation back in line with its target. So there's a lot of things going on right now in the global economy, and the last thing that we need is another military conflict flaring up that potentially brings into play some of the superpowers. So I wanted to alert you that this conflict has once again boiled over into military conflict. And if it does continue for any prolonged period of time, that will have a negative impact on the global economy at a time when we really need less bad news and more good news to get things back on track and get the growth coming back again. So I'll keep you posted on any major developments that are happening in Israel that I think are relevant. Hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and here's something to put a smile on your face.